Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Today we've got 3 cards to talk about. We have the new Limited Produce card for Kiriko and the Limited Support for Madoka. We also have the time-limited support for Fuyuko that ties into the 7-Eleven campaign that Shiny Colors is doing. So let's go ahead and get things started with Kiriko. So Kiriko is a pure visual unit, part of Shiny's attempt to revive a team that never actually lived in the first place outside of a very fringe use in 2020. Visual Antika is a team that has really struggled to have a proper identity outside of it just tries to function off of all of the core strengths of Antika, but never having the support to really stand the test of time like the other variations the team have in the past. So Kiriko is the attempt to bring that back up into the limelight, and whether or not it works is going to depend on how many more pieces of support Visual Antika get. So taking a look at things, Kiriko's first appeal is a visual 3.8 that ignores the judge's interest, that applies a 40% visual buff for 3 turns, and also reduces your current mental by 15%. It has a plus appeal effect that is new and entirely unique to Kiriko so far, which is known as Flexible. The requirement is that you need the full Antika lineup, and the turn count needs to be turn 2 or earlier. This applies Flexible for 1 turn. Now, how Flexible works is a little weird, and there's a maybe small issue with it currently, so I'll try to explain it as it functions right now. What this does is it allows your plus appeals to ignore their activation conditions as long as they were drawn either prior to using Flexible or the same turn, or rather the turn preceding you drawing out the Flexible effect. So if I use Flexible and I draw an appeal that following turn where I used Flexible and it has a plus appeal, it will be activated. The same goes to any plus appeals that I already had before using Flexible. What this doesn't apply to, and this is where people think it might be a bug, is that it does not apply to appeals that you draw through a mulligan. So if you throw away an appeal and draw something new that has a plus the turn after you use Flexible, it does not activate. Which makes me think it checks your appeals at the start of the turn rather than throughout the entire turn. We'll have to see. The upgraded version of it is a visual 5.0 that continues to ignore interest, applies an 80% visual buff for 3 turns, and reduces your current mental by 25%. The plus appeal changes the conditions by now requiring it to be turn 3 or less, and applies Flexible for 2 turns. Looking at her passives now, her 1-star passive is a visual 60% up if it's turn 2 or earlier, which has a 35% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a visual 100% up as long as your max mental is 4,500 or higher, while your current mental is 75% or higher. This has a 30% chance to activate twice. Her 4-star passive requires your max mental to be 4,500 or higher, and your current mental to be 74% or lower. It's a 130% visual buff with interest ignore. This has a 30% chance to activate twice. All of these are pretty good. The 2-star and 4-star passive for sure are the highlights here, and indicate that Visual Antika, just like the previous versions of Antika, are going to be shooting for a higher health pool. Whether or not we're going to continue to see more damage cuts like what we're seeing with Kiriko in the 15% and 25%, we'll have to see. But this is an interesting baseline to work with. Taking a look at her memory appeal, it's a visual 2.5 that links into a visual 3.5, which is okay. I think it could have afforded to be a little higher for Antika specifically because, again, they don't have a ton of things to really speed up the process. They only have, I believe, 1 duet off the top of my head, but maybe that's not correct anymore. So they're still relatively slow, especially Visual Antika. So the numbers feel like they could have been tweaked, but maybe they're cooking with something. Who knows? I'm simply hoping that Visual Antika gets to actually be a team, as opposed to being nothing for the last 3 years. As for Kiriko herself, I think this card is pretty good. There's a lot of moving pieces going on with this card. I think the idea of Flexible is really interesting, and I hope that they expand upon it within Antika, and I hope it stays in Antika effect for a while before they decide to push it out to other teams. I think this card is at least an A+. I don't know if she's necessarily an S tier unit, but I do think that this card is pretty strong. She just needs a real home, and I think she'll shine super bright. So next then we have Madoka. Madoka is a pure vocal support, and has a lot of reasonable things going on that make her good for both vocal Nocchill, and maybe some applications for vocal teams in general. It depends on how much you choose to use reactions. So starting things off, we have her appeals, which are a vocal 2.5 and vocal 3.5 respectively, that apply 50% attention up and 20% reaction up. The initial appeal applies for 2 turns, while the upgraded appeal lasts for 3 turns. This is okay. 20% is still pretty low for Nocchill standards, and there aren't a lot of ways to necessarily make that better now that we know that reaction applies per buff. So in this case, the 20% rolls 1 out of 5. And then if you had additional reactions, it would roll those individually. And as long as one of those hit, then you avoid. Otherwise, you miss and you get hit. For her passives, she has a vocal 50% up as long as Madoka is on your team. 20% chance to activate 3 times. Her 2-star passive is a vocal 130% up if you have 2 or more instances of an active reaction up buff. So if you used both of Madoka's appeals within a turn of each other, you would technically have at least 1 turn where you could activate the vocal 130%. If you have other Nocchill appeals that can raise your reaction as an active buff, then that contributes towards this vocal 130%. It has a 20% chance to activate twice. The 4-star passive is a vocal 100% up if you're in the center position, and it has a 20% chance to activate once. Both of these are pretty good. The 130% passive might be a little hard to use depending on what support appeals you're using, or if you're trying to use this outside of Nocchill. The vocal 100% up is just a nice little bonus if you are building a center with her, which is not the worst thing to be doing. For her masteries, she's got some pretty okay ones. Notably, she has Unit Mastery SP, which reaches plus 10 at level 75, it's plus 7 at level 70, and plus 4 at level 50. She also has access to Unit Mastery Vocal Limit Up, which reaches plus 5 at level 80, it's plus 3 at level 75, and plus 2 at level 60. She has access to Excellent Boost, which is a plus 3 at level 70, or plus 2 at level 5, and lastly, Vocal Mastery Stamina, reaching plus 5 at level 80, plus 3 at level 65, or plus 1 at level 30. You will definitely need to get copies of this card. 2-star feels like almost a mandatory requirement for this card to really function, because a lot of what makes her important really doesn't show up until the midway point. And otherwise, you're just looking to improve the numbers as you go. I think this card is actually pretty good for Vocal Nocchill, which is already a team that has seen relative success even lately with nice little improvements here and there. So as a card, I would say that she's probably A, maybe A+. The passives are certainly helping her out here. The masteries do feel a little on the lower end, but I think that there are some still good applications for this Madoka, especially if you can put together a solid Vocal Nocchill support lineup to make the most of her unit mastery abilities. Lastly, we're going to be taking a look at the new Fuyiko as part of the 7-11 collaboration. This card is pure visual and has a lot of weird things going on with it because it is a collaboration card. Notably, a 7% and 11% passive, lots of play off of 7-11, which I get it. The 1-star passive is a visual 11% up if you're in the visual position, and it has a 70% chance to activate once, which I think is very funny. She has a visual 70% up as long as your mental is 70% or lower, and has an 11% chance to activate once. She also has a visual 11% up if Fuyiko's on your team, and it has a 70% chance to activate twice. It's a decision, I'll say that much. For her masteries, she has a lot of interesting ones, but they aren't really that impactful. The biggest things you'll notice is that she has access to Visual Mastery Visual, which when maxed out is plus 8 at level 75. Otherwise, it is plus 6 at level 55, or at its lowest, it's plus 2 at level 1. Also has access to Radio Mastery Mental, which starts out as a plus 2, and works its way up to a +5 by level 40. So you don't even need additional copies in order to make that effective. Lastly, she has Radio Mastery Visual Limit Up, which starts out at a +1 at level 65, and works its way up to a +2 at level 80. This card is not very good. If the 70% passive did not continue the trend of being either a 7 or 11, I think that this card could have been actually an okay pick for visual teams, just because having access to a relatively free 70% buff would be kinda nice, but otherwise this card is just for the novelty of Shiny Colors having a collaboration with 7-Eleven. So, get your copies while you can. You get one for logging in, and then the additional copies you get by producing in Wing. So you need to produce 3 times in total in Wing, and at least one of those ideally should be a True End, and you will get all of your copies. So, that will do it for the video today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next. Let's look forward to it together. Till the next one, I've been Sho. Again, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.